The smell of catered coffee and sheet cake hit me the second I walked into the school library, but it wasn't the sugar that made my stomach twist. I was halfway through the PTA meeting, sitting at a plastic folding chair under those awful fluorescent lights, when Mrs. Herman wrapped up the budget discussion, and my stepmother, all glossy hair and practiced smile, stood up to make a special announcement. "I'm thrilled to share," she chimed into the microphone, "that thanks to incredible family support, my daughter Olivia has secured her tuition for St. Alden's." A few polite claps scattered through the room. That's when my phone buzzed in my lap. Bank alert, transfer, $38,000 withdrawn from account ending in 5123. My account. My late mother's college fund for me. My skin went prickly hot as my eyes locked on the number. 38,000. Gone. And she was beaming at the crowd like she'd just won an award for Best Parent. I barely heard the PTA president's follow-up. The sound in my ears was a low, pulsing hum. You know, the one you get before you faint. I scrolled to check the account history, praying it was some mistake. No. The balance sat at nearly zero, save for some stubborn cents. Every muscle in me wanted to shout across the library right then, to demand an explanation in front of every teacher and parent. But my dad was 2 rows back, chatting with the vice principal, eyes bright like this was all perfectly normal. I slid the phone face down on my lap, taking in the rows of parents applauding my stepmother's generosity. The people here saw her as the picture-perfect PTA treasurer, the woman who hosted bake sales and stayed after meetings to stack chairs. No one saw what happened in our kitchen at 7 a.m., when she forgot to tell me Dad's credit card was maxed out, or when she borrowed my tips from work for grocery emergencies and never paid them back. My fingers dug crescents into my thighs as she walked back to her seat, glowing with accomplishment. I kept thinking about my mom, my real mom, who worked double shifts so that money could sit safe until I needed it. But the hum in my ears sharpened into a thought I couldn't ignore. If I stayed silent now, I might never see that money again. Still, calling her out here, in this room, would stage a war I wasn't ready to fight. Yet. So when the meeting hit its coffee break, and chairs scraped against the tile, I decided my first move would be private. I stood, heart pounding, and walked straight toward the woman who just announced my future had been traded away. Shall I write the next chapter? She was pouring herself coffee into one of those flimsy styrofoam cups, chatting with another PTA mom about the raffle prizes. I stepped in, waiting until the other mom drifted off before I spoke. "What's this about $38,000 leaving my account?" My voice quivered, but not from uncertainty, from holding back the yell I wanted to unleash right there. She didn't even blink, just stirred 2 packets of sugar into the cup like I'd asked her where the restroom was. "It's family money," she said casually, shrugging one shoulder. "You weren't using it." My nails bit into my palms. "It's my college fund, Mom." She cut me off with a saccharine smile. "Your late mother set aside that money when you were a kid. And what would she think seeing you skip school, passing up every admission offer?" "I deferred a year to take care of Grandma," I reminded her, heat rising in my face. "The fund was still mine." She let out a soft, fake laugh and looked around the room, probably checking who might overhear. "Oh, come on. Olivia is starting St. Alden's in the fall. That fund will be put to far better use getting her through a place like that. It'll look wonderful on her resume. And on ours." She sipped her coffee as if she'd just mentioned the weather. I felt like I'd been slapped. Ours? This was never about my sister's education. It's about your image. Her eyes hardened for just a flicker before she put the warm PTA mom mask back on. "You really ought to let go of this jealousy thing. It's making you sound petty." She leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "Besides, if you go around making a scene, you'll embarrass your father. And you wouldn't want to damage his reputation at the school, would you?" There were so many things I could have said in that moment. Could have done. But my dad's laugh floated from across the room. She knew exactly where to stick the knife. As coffee break ended and the buzz of voices faded back into the meeting, I sat down, feeling the weight of the bank alert still burning through my pocket. If what she said was true about my dad's name on the account, this fight was going to be much harder than a bank reversal. But I wasn't ready to let it go. And the little incidents over the past year were starting to take on a new, ugly light. Maybe they'd all been leading here. Shall I write the next chapter? It was like someone had pulled a string in my memory, and all the small slights came tumbling back, one after another. Last spring, when I was leaving for my evening shift at the cafe, I'd caught her rifling through my tote bag. She'd accidentally taken $20 from my wallet and laughed it off as grabbing change for groceries. Then, over the summer, the scholarship dinner, she'd convinced me to skip attending, saying it was going to be mostly donors, and later I saw the thank you letter printed in the school bulletin. Only, where it used to say my name as the recipient, it now read, Olivia Harper. The same warm, rehearsed smile beaming out from the photo. At first, each thing seemed small enough to swallow. You don't blow up over a missing lunch, or a name swap in a letter when it's for the good of family. But now, sitting there in that library with the buzz of teachers and the shuffling of papers, I realized she'd been chipping away at my place in this family, and my claim to that fund, for a long time. I remember once overhearing her on the phone telling her sister, "Oh, Emma doesn't need to go to college. She's street smart. She'll figure life out. Olivia's the one with the real talent." Back then, I thought it was just her bias talking. Now, my stomach knotted. It was strategy. The meeting wrapped, and everyone shuffled out into the hallway, filled with bulletin boards and bake sale flyers. She walked ahead with two other moms, laughing, as if she had nothing to hide. I lingered by the drinking fountain, staring at my phone, my thumb hovering over the mobile banking app. It showed the empty space where my future used to be. $38,000 transferred away, marked only with ED escrow, transfer. The logical thing would be to confront her now, at home, with Dad. But my gut told me she was already preparing her defense. I could hear her voice in my head. She's being dramatic. She's twisting the story. The PTA moms in half the neighborhood adored her. Who would take my side? If I wanted any chance of getting that money back, I'd have to collect more than my outrage. I'd need proof, in black and white. And that meant digging into things she never thought I'd see. Shall I write the next chapter? That night, I tried to approach it gently. We were all at the dinner table. Dad halfway through recounting some story from his office, Olivia scrolling on her phone, and her, my stepmother, spooning more mashed potatoes onto her plate, like she'd worked up an appetite from all that philanthropy. "I got an alert from the bank today," I said, keeping my voice even, "about the transfer from my college account." Her eyes flicked up just enough to register the statement, then dropped back to her plate. "We already talked about this at the meeting," she said lightly. "It's not the right time to start all that again." Dad frowned. "What transfer?" She laid a hand on his wrist. "It's fine, honey. We used Emma's dormant fund to help Olivia with tuition. We'll make sure she's taken care of in other ways." The words dormant fund made something inside me flare hot. It wasn't dormant. I was saving it for when I could actually go. We never agreed. "That account was under both our names," she interrupted, voice suddenly picking up an edge. "You're acting like this is some kind of theft, Emma. It's not. We make choices as a family." She turned to Dad. "She's upset because she feels left out. But really, she's embarrassed about not going to college right after high school." It was exactly the script I expected, painting me as insecure, emotional, maybe even vindictive. Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose like the whole thing was just more female drama he didn't want to referee. "You've been talking about going for years," he said to me, "but you never applied again after Grandma." He trailed off. I deferred to care for her. And when she died, I stopped. What was the point right now? I could see how neatly she'd cornered me. In his mind, she was being practical, reallocating unused funds to the child who could use them now. That was when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. She planned for the day she could justify draining that account. The fake joint decision, the PTA announcement, even looping Olivia in without telling me. It was all to cement her version before I could push back. I knew if I kept trying to change his mind with my own words, I'd lose. What I needed next wasn't another argument. It was the kind of evidence she couldn't spin out of guilt or jealousy. And that meant prying open her spotless PTA perfect facade, no matter what I found behind it. Shall I write the next chapter? 2 nights later, I waited until I heard their bedroom door click shut, and the faint hum of their TV filter through the wall. The house smelled like the lemon cleaner she swore by. The same one she used to polish the desk where she kept all the important family papers. That desk had a tiny brass key, which she usually kept looped through her car fob. I'd seen her toss both into the bowl by the door earlier. My heartbeat was so loud it felt like it was rattling my ribs as I pushed my hand past the jumble of receipts and sunglasses, closing my fingers around the cool metal. I worked by the light of my phone flashlight, crouched in front of her desk cabinet. The little brass key slid into the lock with a soft click. Inside were neatly labeled folders: taxes, house maintenance, PTA records. It was the blue one labeled education that made my mouth go dry. I almost stopped there. Part of me still clung to the hope it was just paperwork for Olivia's new school. But in the middle of the stack, I found the statement, a printout from my bank. Same account ending in 5123. A transfer line identical to what I'd seen on my app, right down to the label, ED Escrow, Transfer. Attached by a paperclip was an email confirmation from St. Alden's Bursar's office, from her personal Gmail. She hadn't even bothered to route it through Dad. No CC, no joint decision. It was an outright move from my account into an account she alone controlled, followed by a tuition payment in Olivia's name. The air in the room felt heavier, hotter. I shoved the papers back in the folder exactly as I'd found them and locked the cabinet, slipping the key back into the bowl by the door. My hands ached from clenching. On one hand, I finally had the proof I'd been telling myself I needed. On the other, proof meant accepting this wasn't some temporary lapse in judgment. This was theft, dressed up as family priorities. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what it would take for her to admit what she'd done. She wouldn't confess in private. She'd twist it. She wouldn't back down in front of Dad. She'd cry and blame me. If she was going to be exposed, it had to happen in a space where her charm and narrative couldn't smother the facts. Somewhere, the documents could speak louder than her voice. And then it hit me. The PTA's annual budget audit was next week. Every key member of the board, principal included, would be watching the treasurer's numbers like hawks. Shall I write the next chapter? The morning of the audit, I woke up before my alarm. My hands were shaky, not from lack of sleep, but from the adrenaline that had been rolling in my veins since the night I found those documents. I printed 3 copies of the bank statement and the bursar's email, one for the principal, one for the PTA president, and one for me. Each sheet felt heavier than paper, like it held the weight of every bitter glance and family decision I'd swallowed up until now. At the school library, the tables were arranged in a U-shape, with the PTA officers along one side and the principal in the center. My stepmother sat in her usual treasurer's seat, posture perfect, pearls gleaming, flipping through her binder. She winked at the secretary like this was just another chance to shine. The meeting started with routine reports, chatter about upcoming events. My heart thudded against my tin travel mug as the principal invited the treasurer to present the year's expenditures. My stepmother stood confidently, walking the room through neat columns of numbers, her voice warm and rehearsed. And, she concluded, thanks to our diligent budgeting, we were also able to facilitate a private education opportunity for one of our own, my daughter Olivia, ensuring her future success at St. Alden's. That was my cue. "Excuse me," I said, standing. Every head turned. The silence was a living thing, heavy and expectant. "I have documents here showing that the funds used for that tuition were taken from a college account left to me by my late mother," I continued, holding the papers in front of me. "An account that was under legal custodianship until I turned 18, and never authorized for anyone else's expenses." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. My stepmother froze, then gave a brittle smile. "I think you're mistaken, Emma. That account was—" "Here's the bank statement," I interrupted, stepping forward to hand a copy to the principal. "And here's the email receipt from the bursar's office, sent from her personal email address, 2 weeks before the PTA meeting where she made this announcement." She turned pink, then ashy, her voice climbing. "You're attacking me in front of the community because you resent me as your stepmother. This is petty, vindictive." "No," the principal said sharply, flipping through the pages. "This is serious, and it's not appropriate to continue until this is clarified. We'll pause this meeting and review these transactions." Gasps, whispers. My stepmother's chair scraped sharply against the floor as she sat down, lips pressed so tightly they went white. I caught Dad's expression in the back of the room, a deep, unsettled frown that told me his certainty in her was cracking. But I knew the cost of this blow would hit me next, and probably hard. Shall I write the next chapter? The fallout didn't wait for the end of the day. It started the second we pulled into the driveway. Dad killed the engine and sat gripping the steering wheel, knuckles pale. "Did you really have to humiliate her in front of the whole PTA?" His voice wasn't a shout, but the disappointment in it stung even more. I stared at him. "Do you hear yourself? She emptied the account Mom built for me. $38,000. That wasn't hers to give away." From the passenger seat, her voice came, tight and brittle. "I explained it was family money, but you had to make it into a spectacle, to make me look like a criminal." I laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. "You are a criminal when you take what isn't yours." Dad finally turned to look at me, his eyes conflicted, pupils darting like he was weighing two versions of reality. "She's done a lot for this family, Emma. Maybe this was handled wrong, but—" I snapped. "Handled wrong? She forged the entire scenario to make sure I wouldn't have a say. She made a public announcement so I'd be embarrassed to push back. And you were going to just let it happen." My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Her seatbelt clicked. She got out, slamming the door, muttering, "I can't have this conversation with her when she's hysterical." The word hit me like a slap. Hysterical. Her favorite way to shrink me down to unreasonable girl throwing a fit. Dad stayed in the car a moment longer, rubbing his temples. "I need to see that paperwork again," he said quietly. It was the first crack in his armor, but it wasn't the vindication I wanted. More like the start of him realizing he might look bad by association. Inside, I placed the printed copies on the kitchen table without a word. He stood over them, scanning line by line. I watched his jaw tighten, his mouth flatten. "This part," he said, pointing at the bursar email. "You're sure it came from her?" "She printed it herself and kept it in her desk," I told him. "She never thought I'd look." By the time he was done reading, his expression had shifted into something colder, more calculating, a look I'd never seen aimed at her. "I'll handle this," was all he said, before walking toward their bedroom. That night was the first time I ever heard their voices raised behind closed doors. Muffled words, sharp bursts. My name surfacing, then college fund, then silence. She didn't come out the rest of the night, and when I checked my email before bed, I saw a new message from St. Alden's with the subject line, "Tuition payment on hold, pending verification." Shall I write the next chapter? 2 days later, the house felt like it had split into separate climate zones. My stepmother moved in tight, silent circuits between her room and the kitchen, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Dad was quieter than usual, his eyes never fully meeting mine at breakfast. Word was out in the PTA community. I knew because Marcy, one of the secretary volunteers, sent me a text. Is it true she can't sign checks until further notice? People are talking. I typed back, yes, and then stared at the little read mark, feeling equal parts vindicated and sick. The confirmation came officially that afternoon, a school-wide email from the principal announcing that due to ongoing review, the treasurer's signing privileges are temporarily suspended. No names mentioned, but everyone knew. I found Dad in the garage, pretending to reorganize the same shelf he'd been getting to for 3 years. "The payment's been reversed," he said without looking at me. "St. Alden's says the deposit will be refunded once the bank clears the request." A part of me wanted to shout with relief, but it was tangled up with something heavier. "So, that means the money's coming back? To me?" He nodded once. "It never should have been moved without your consent." He paused, sighing like the admission took something out of him. I should have been paying more attention. I leaned against the doorframe. "Do you believe me now? That it wasn't jealousy or me trying to attack her?" His jaw worked before he answered. "I believe you. But it's going to make things in this house different. You should be prepared for that." Different, as in frost at the dinner table. As in her pointedly clattering her fork when I entered the kitchen. As in Olivia glaring like I'd just stolen her future. That night, as the refund finally hit my account in a pending status, I sat on my bed with my laptop open to the admissions site for the community college I'd applied to years ago. My cursor hovered over Start New Application. It felt defiant, taking back the very thing she tried to erase. I hit Start. For the first time since the PTA meeting, I felt like I was steering my own life again. Shall I write the final chapter? The refund cleared 3 days later. I stared at the restored balance on my banking app like it was a photograph of my mother. Both familiar and overwhelming. $38,000. Back where it belonged. At dinner that night, the silence was so thick I could hear the soft scrape of Dad's fork against the plate. My stepmother didn't look at me once. Olivia barely picked at her food, shooting me dagger glances between sips of water. The only words spoken were her perfunctory, "Pass the salt," delivered without so much as glancing up. I expected her to unleash one last speech, some grand justification or tearful manipulation, but instead, she seemed to settle into a colder strategy, exile by ice. I was no longer part of the family, not in her mind, which, I realized, might be the only freedom I was going to get. Later, Dad knocked on my door. He didn't come in, just leaned on the frame. "I'm glad you have it back," he said. "And I'm sorry." His eyes were tired. He looked older than he had last week. "I know," I said quietly. I didn't tell him that sorry had come too late to fix the things that had cracked inside me. I didn't tell him that I was already planning classes, emailing advisors. Because this wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming the story she'd worked so hard to write over. The one where I was an afterthought. The one where my mother's sacrifice could be rerouted to serve her image. On the first day of the new semester, I'll walk into a classroom paid for by that fund. I'll take my seat knowing exactly what it cost to protect it. Not just the fight in the library, but the years of swallowing little things, of ignoring my gut. If there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that in blended families, control often hides behind words like we and us. But sometimes the most radical thing you can do is pull yourself out of that we and say, This is mine, and mean it.